Hey, what's up, Blazer fans? Welcome to We Have a Take the What podcast. I am Tara Bowen Biggs, and I am so excited to be back talking to Rose. Rose, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Tara?
I am great. I barely remembered how to hit record because it's been so long since we've talked. We've got a lot to talk about today. And to help us talk about everything that's going on and what might be happening in the near future, we have her name from Twitter as Kat Renzer. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, Kat.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's going to be fun to talk about the draft.
We've got just this is like, prime silly season. The Blazers have been done playing for a while now. And just to give context, it is June 30th and free agency is starting officially in a couple of hours. So we've had the draft, we're looking at free agency. Of course, a couple trades have already happened. We're going to be expecting more. Lots of things are going on. So I thought for the icebreaker today, we could start out with what's just one thing that you are wishing for in this upcoming what we're getting ready for this summer. One thing you're wishing for. Anybody want to go first?
I'll go. I would be happy if we could bring home another summer league championship.
Yes, I love it.
It's possible, right? Wemby's not going to be there, or I imagine he's not going to be there playing, and I think it's very possible.
That's
Yeah.
a great one. Also, that for the trajectory that we're on as a team, that's a great goal to have that feels within like our realm and also would make us feel good about the future.
We need something to carry us through the losing seasons, and a summer league championship does that.
We're going to go for all the summer league championships, all of the commissioner's cup or whatever it's called, the in-season tournament victories that we can get. I think I love it. From your mouth to God's ears on that one. How about you, Rose?
Okay, so this is something I've been thinking about for the past couple of seasons, and I'm a little bit torn on it. But I think that my hope for the which is a very silly hope because it has nothing to do with the Blazers exactly, but also everything to do with how I feel about our coaches. I would like the NBA to take a look at the rule that allows coaches to dress down in games because I want these coaches back in suits because I am honest enough about my biases to say that if maybe I had seen Chauncey Billups in a suit for the past 3 years, I might be able to envision him as a head coach a little bit more. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Bring back suits, guys. They look nice. They also I feel like a certain amount of respect for a guy walking around in a suit, and these guys look like they're going to an AAU tournament.
I
The
love that
three-quarter
take.
zip has had its moment, and it's time to move on from that moment. I would agree with you.
I love it. And I also I used to love how Terry Stotts, one of his kind of charitable things that he did is that he would give his suits away at the end of the season. And I guess a lot of head coaches would do that. It was like part of like giving it to like whatever the men's equivalent to Dress for Success, or maybe that's what it's called, but for suits. And now, like, yeah, here's more fleece. It doesn't seem as I love it. I think that would be amazing. I mean, for summer league, that's one thing. I'm fine if they want to wear sweats at summer league, but are you okay with that?
Yeah,
Sweats at
that
summer league's
seems fine.
okay?
That seems fine. They also look like they're wearing like practice uniforms when they play summer league, as opposed to like real uniforms. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll just say, and I say that with the full humility that I really enjoy that I get to wear sweats when I go to work most days because I work from home. And so I realize that I am asking them to conform to a level of uh formality that I rarely have to conform to. So just putting that out there.
All right. Well, maybe the people who work for the NBA who are listening to our podcast will take that run that right up the chain so we can get some results. This is for me, this is my annual plea to anyone who will listen to turn NBA free agency into a reality show. I had this idea before I even watched reality shows. And now that I'm like fully like up to my neck in watching reality shows, I think this is an even better idea. Just one free agent. You don't have to do it for everyone. Just choose one free agent, 30 GMs, a mansion, one-on-ones, group activities, like hand out little miniature Larry O'Brien trophies to your favorite. Everybody else goes home. Have a hometown visit where you go to the town that's courting you. And then at the end, you make your pick. It writes itself. I don't know why this hasn't been done yet. So that's my one wish for this off season. Just my annual plea. Please turn NBA free agency into a reality show like The Bachelor. I think that's a good format for it.
I love the idea. They can go on dates, talk about basketball, what
Yeah.
restaurant do they choose? When they do the hometowns, like, what are they trying to highlight? Is it the beaches? Is it the practice facility? Wine country? I don't know. It could be a lot of different things based on the individual player, but I would totally watch that TV show.
I don't even really watch reality TV, and I think that's an excellent idea. I was thinking just now about how some of the storylines that we've seen play out now in retrospect that we found out about them would have been so fun to see on TV afterwards. Like, remember the chair incident with the Clippers? Like, think about the DeAndre Jordan chair incident, how that would have
Mhm.
played off in reality TV. Like, what a great episode. Or like, remember how like recently Chandler Parsons told the story about how he ended up not being a Blazer that summer. I think he said it on a podcast where he talked about how he wanted to be a Blazer, but then his agent pulled him out of the room with the Grizzlies, and he's like, "Look, you're not going to be a Blazer because of your history of injuries. So I need you to go back in that room and be the most excited you've ever been because this is your contract. This is where you're signing." And that's exactly what he said he did. What great television that would have made like a year later. Like, you can't probably air it like live, like when it's happening, but like as like a postmortem, what a great peek behind the curtain that would be.
That's a perfect example of very similar things happen in The Bachelor all the time, where it's like, you're not going to pick this person, but the producers want them to go through. So you go with it. The aspect that I like to think about is the group challenges, like having all of the GMs like play like flag football against each other, or like beach volleyball, or I don't know what. Can't think of any of the other group challenges. Oh, there was one in the last season of The Bachelor where they hung these sausages on this round thing and they spun it, and you had to like grab it and eat the sausage, and whoever did that first like won the challenge. Like, I would love to see these guys see how they do under pressure. I mean, you send the players out there all the time under the lights, having to perform. Let's see how they do it. I think that would be really fun.
If they did that, I think that some franchises might choose their GMs differently than they have been. Because some of them I would be like, I wouldn't want to see that on television and we're gonna look silly.
Well, that's all things to consider. All things to consider. It's sitting right there, NBA TV. Get in on the reality game. I don't know, maybe
Plus,
they
it
already
just
have it.
gives people a more personable view of the people that are in the front office. I mean, even just the draft night, I think the only time we ever hear Jody's voice is in the video where they call their new draftee. She seems so happy and excited every single time. Like, I think she loves draft night, yet we've never heard her talk to the fan base. And it's just fascinating to me because it's kind of like she's a silent owner, but I don't really think that's the case, or at least it's not on draft night, and it kind of makes her seem a little bit more human.
Mm-hmm. Excellent
Yeah,
point.
Paul didn't speak to us a lot, but he did speak to us at times. And because he had owned the team for so long, we had a feel for who he was.
Well, that is a great segue into one of the many things that we have to talk about. The draft has happened. The Blazers picked Donovan Clingan with number 7. What was everybody's reactions? Kat, what
Well,
was
as
your
you can,
reaction? Oh,
can I just say, as you can imagine, my dad was thrilled.
oh, UConn, right?
Yes, UConn, and all things UConn. So anyone wondering out there, I know you all deeply care about my dad and his opinions on basketball that make no sense whatsoever. Loves this pick for us.
But how does Rose feel about the pick?
I mean, I'll say I think it's great. One of the things is I didn't think he would be there, and I didn't really think that he was like a serious option, so I didn't really consider that. I also tried to not get too attached to any players before the draft because as soon as I get to know players, I'm like, I want that guy. At all costs, I want that guy. I would be a horrible GM because I'd be trading up and down to get all my favorite guys without it basketball really like being the number one driving factor just because I like these guys. So, I'm happy because I like new guys and he seems happy to be with us. And I'm happy that he seems very good and unique in terms of being like a 7-2 center and young and with great upside, like whatever. But honestly, I just like new guys.
I'm the same way. I don't watch or listen to any of the pre-draft podcasts because I just don't want to get attached to anybody. I don't want to get disappointed if the person I want is not picked. I don't know a lot about these guys except that I did watch some of the college tournament and remember some of that from the win. I'm excited that he comes from a winning team. I was not real excited for the G League guys. And I think that experiment is kind of over, and I'm happy that's over. So he seems like a very nice young man. He really, he wore tux. That's kind of fun. Um, he seems to be very, a big poster on Instagram, which might help with our social media selections because it seems like a lot of the players have gone away from posting on social media or they do it on private accounts that nobody knows about it. But it seems like Donovan is an Instagram guy. He seems excited to be here. And so, with centers, I feel like our history with centers, maybe you can never have too many centers. If somebody's going to get injured, maybe somebody that leaves somebody open to be healthy. So, why not? And I'm excited that Ayton seemed excited about it too. So, let's see what they do. I don't have a lot of preconceptions of what that might be, but he seems like a nice young man.
What about you,
I
Tara? What do you think?
I was first of all going into the draft, I wanted to like get kind of an overview and find out what people were talking about as far as like needs for the Blazers and what they, who they might select. But then very quickly I got so confused because there were so many names that started with D. And I was just like, oh no. I was like, between Dalton Connect and Donovan Clingan, I was completely confused. Because I just like kept hearing their names going, wait, which one's the tall one? Which one's the guard? I like can't remember. And there's some other guy's name, everybody's names. There's just so many names around draft time that they just like they come like so fast and furious. And especially with this draft, with less agreement than in other drafts about like who were the top picks, there were just so many names to keep track of. But I did know that there was a really tall guy whose name started with a D who played for UConn, who had championship experience, not just one but two champions, somebody who has been all the way. And as you have both had to sit and listen to me talk about for the last many years, how excited I am to have somebody that we're potentially going to build around who comes from a winning situation and who has had to play for something. And not only, this is the other thing I was thinking about, not only has he played for something, I watched a video of him talking with Sam Vecine on the Game Theory podcast. And they sat down and were breaking down his game. And it is so clear that he has just had an incredible coach for the last 2 years. So to have a guy come from just awesome coaching and a absolute winning all the way, you can't win anymore. I'm just over the moon for that for the Trailblazers. I think it's going to be like absolutely fantastic. But then I was also thinking, and like I don't want people to like, you know, think I'm like thinking that like, oh, he's going to be like Wemby. But Wemby exists for the next 10 or 15 years. And if you're going to have any hope at all of slowing him down, you've got to have a giant person who is good at defense. Like, maybe we're not going to be able to score around him, but if we could slow him down a little bit with Donovan Clingan at least, like, you know, approaches him in height. He's not, you know, it's not the same, but I don't think you can leave that thought out if you're thinking long-term into the future. I haven't heard anybody else say that though, so that might be just kind of like a ridiculous, like, roll your
No, I
eyes at
think
Tara
that's
thought.
I think that's a really good point.
I mean,
Yeah.
you got to do something, right? But this video, I would suggest anybody go listen to it, where he's talking with on Game Theory podcast, because just watching, the thing that really stood out to me is his decision making. And for a Blazer center to have the high level of decision making, I think is really exciting. And just, you know, his defensive mind, you know, they keep saying this team is going to be defensive, and you know, he fits that mold. But I'm really excited. I also love that he had a bow tie on. It's going to be fun to learn about him. My biggest concern for him, and this is like, it's not really tongue in cheek and it's not probably very important, but I am a little worried that he's going to be homesick, because he played his entire life in his state. He's from Bristol, Connecticut, grew up in Bristol, played in Bristol, went to UConn, and now he's on the other side. Like, you can't get much farther away. And so I hope that he doesn't get homesick. But he also seems like a totally obsessed hoop head, so he might not even notice that he's not at home because he's so busy playing basketball.
Yeah, I was reading an article. It may have been ESPN, I can't remember, but when he was talking about his decision to either go to the draft last year or go back to college, and it sounded like he really came to the decision to go back to college on his own because he felt like he was not ready. Yes, he could have been drafted last year, but he felt like he had more that he needed to improve on and did not feel ready for that decision. So to me, that says somebody who has some self introspection, some self awareness, maturity around decision making. And I think all those things can be a real positive on the court. So I thought that just said a lot about who he is. So I'm excited as well.
One of the things that, you know, I was thinking about, Tara, when you were talking about, I hope he's not homesick, is one, I think a lot of guys end up a little bit homesick. A lot of guys find ways to bring home to wherever it is that they land. But two, like, I don't know if he has siblings, but he, you know, he talked about this a little bit during the draft. Like, he lost his mom in 2018 to breast cancer. And like, I don't know, like maybe his family just comes with him. Maybe his dad or whoever's in his life just comes with him. He doesn't have a mom. If I don't know if he has siblings, if he doesn't have siblings or he's the young, like it's possible he could just bring his family with him. Um, and I will say, like, I can't imagine losing my parent at that age, but we know that he's resilient and can overcome a lot of things because he still like was able to achieve a lot in basketball since then. So hopefully he can make that adjustment.
Yeah, look, it kind of seems like maybe his girlfriend will stay out here with him, or at least she's been out here for the weekend. So that might help as well.
And I'm always so relieved when they step off the private jet and it's a nice day. So that was,
I know.
we had that in our favor this year.
Yeah, and like I would say, like the day before was crappy. The day before it was overcast and muggy and it was not a good day. And then I realized that they brought him in the next day, and I saw like the video of him stepping off the jet, and I was like, oh, nice clear blue sky. Okay. This is a nice introduction to Portland. And like, I mean, we do always have one of these uncharacteristic summers where I think it's overcast, periodically throughout the summer. I think maybe like every like 5 to 8 years we have one of these summers, but thank goodness, bright sunny day. Probably got a clear view of Mount Hood as he came in. Like I felt good about his introduction to us.
There was another, I can't remember if it was the same article I was reading or not. I read a bunch of articles, but there was one that was talking about how during the summers he used to work in landscaping, and in winters he would shovel snow. And so, hey, we've got a snow shoveler. So when we get
Yeah.
into our bad weather week or two and the guys are stuck at home, we have got a professional snow shoveler on
Yeah,
the
maybe
team.
DeAndre could just go stay with him next time there's a big storm coming in. Good bonding for the centers.
Yeah.
DeAndre can drop some knowledge and experience, and Donovan can make sure that they can get out. I love it. That's a great point. He probably has a lot of experience driving in the snow as well.
Yes.
And he will laugh at us when we close the city down for an inch of snow.
And then he will step out on the ice and immediately step back into his house so that not to injure himself.
Yes.
And he'll be like,
Snow
why
shoveling
don't
is very different in the ice.
Yes, yes. Um, I did hear in his press conference, he said that he would prefer a block over a dunk, which, made my heart swell, but being out on dunks currently. I went and looked it up though, and oh wait, no, that's the other new player we're going to talk about, how much he dunks. So I couldn't find what his record and how many dunks he actually did in college, but I am very excited to have a rim protector because it's been a while since we've had. I mean, Nurkic to some extent, but I don't think that was maybe his best skill. And I think Donovan is good enough that he's not just a rim protector, he's a rim deterrent, that he could keep people away from the rim. What y'all think about the Blazers not getting any additional players out of the draft? Did that take you by surprise?
A little bit, but I was secretly hoping that meant Delano was going to get a contract, and he did. So I was happy about that because I think Delano showed enough promise to give him a real shot on this team, and we'll see if it ends up working out or not. But, if they didn't feel like there was anybody better in the draft, why draft extra bodies if we don't have space for them? So hopefully that wasn't a mistake, but I'm excited for Delano to get a chance to prove what he can give us.
I honestly, it's funny because I was actually a little bit worried about how many picks we had because we didn't have that many spaces on our roster. And I was like, what are we gonna do with all of these new guys? Like, it just wasn't very obvious to me how we would have that much space. And so I guess the one thing that I thought at the end of the draft when it turned out that we only went and got one guy was like how committed they are so far to like the development of the guys that we already have. I think that they must see a lot of potential in the guys they already have. And they were like, well, we can defer some of this to the future by trading. Like, I think they traded a pick away that netted them picks in the future, and they sold one or whatever. And I was like, I feel like there's nothing wrong with that. If you like the guys that you have and you're more interested in seeing how they develop rather than bring in new guys and try to develop them instead. Which also makes me a little bit hopeful that maybe they're like determining a schedule now, that they're like, we're not just going to bring in as much youth as possible like they were doing like last year and the year before. Like maybe now they're like, now we see the vision and maybe we're feeling a little bit more like penciling in some kind of narrative for the development of this team.
On that last note, I think that's still a little bit premature because we still don't know what Scoot and Shaden can do. But after this year, I think maybe they might be able to be to that point. I don't know. I was surprised that they didn't draft more than one player. And I was surprised that they actually gave up a draft pick with Malcolm Brogdon. I kind of thought Malcolm Brogdon might bring in draft picks, at least one or some second rounders. And so I was kind of surprised that a draft pick was attached in that trade, which kind of moves us onto the next thing. I just feel like the Blazers are still really far away from knowing what they're going to be. I don't think they know if they've hit with Scoot or Shaden or Donovan, and to like give up any draft picks in the future. Like, I just feel like that's a little presumptuous on their part. That, like, I feel like we should be hanging on and collecting as many as they should be collecting as many as they can through at least 2029, 2030. Cause like, I hope we're done. That would be fantastic. But it just seems like a little, I would keep more in the coffers, I guess. More draft
I don't
picks.
think that they're done necessarily. I'm
Right.
not saying I
Okay.
think that they're done, but I don't think that they're in the like massive acquisition phase where they're like, we don't see the talent that we want here for the future. And I think that they've landed on some guys where they're like, we can see a vision for these guys if they have more time to develop together. Whereas like bringing in guys who are coming in day one, like you're bringing in like 19, 20-year-old guys who have to start from ground zero. And then now we're bringing, they're interested in looking at guys that they've seen do that into year 2 and 3 and be like, yeah, maybe we're interested in seeing a little bit more before we decide to move on, because you only have so many roster spots. But I don't think they're necessary. I don't think they're done. I just think that they are happy with the guys that they've picked. And I think that they're moving to this strategy now of drafting better, not the most, picking guys that they think are the right guys and not necessarily the most guys to get the most looks at them, because now they have more opportunity to do some of that with a G League team. You know, they have really good scouting now, and they've clearly invested a lot in it. Like maybe like now it's like about making better moves, not the most moves.
Volume wise. Yeah.
One of the
makes
things
sense.
I wanted to say about the Brogdon trade that I like, so I know a lot of people thought like, oh, he would bring in picks, but they got a player, and they got a player that is further along in that development of seeing who they're going to be, and he looks talented. I don't know how many of you guys watched much of the Wizards last year. I wouldn't blame anybody who didn't. I watched a little bit of the Wizards because I had them on my fantasy team. And I was interested in seeing what like a team at the, I'm like, what do the teams at the very bottom look like? I looked at I watched a lot of the Wizards. I watched a lot of the Pistons for this reason, and to see what development looked like. And Deni Avdija looks very good. Like I think he was probably the best Wizard on that team, even though there was bigger names on that team. To me, like if I wanted to pick anyone off that team for my team, I would have picked him. And so I'm like, isn't a guy that seems like he is already promising in this league more valuable than a pick? Because that's what the hope is those picks turn into those guys. And if that's a guy that like our GMs could see would be a valuable contributor to the team that they're trying to build, like I feel like he's as good, or not, if he's at least as good, or if not better than a pick in the future.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of the Wizards games, although one of my good friends lives in DC, is in a Wizards fan, and has been really high on Deni for a while. And so I've I've heard about him in that aspect. I also felt like this was one of those trades that kind of gave us a view on what the Blazers are trying to build. Kind of like you said, not just bringing in randoms, but it was a position that we needed. He brings in defense. And so you kind of start to see what they're looking forward to in the future. And to me, that kind of felt a little bit settling in a way. It's like, okay, we can start to see the plan coming together. Whether it'll hit or not is another conversation, but it made a lot of sense. And Wizards Twitter was pretty unhappy about the trade. So that is always something that makes me happy as well. It's like, okay, well, that might be good for us. So I think we'll see a couple of years down the road how that looks in retrospect, but it felt like it made a lot of sense positionally and what the Blazers need and the timeline that they're working on. I do feel a little bit bad for him in the sense I was reading an article about when he got his contract, and they talked a lot about wasn't just the money. He finally felt settled, like the organization believed in him, and him and his mom bought a home in Virginia, and they just felt a lot of stability, which was really important to him. And then now he's traded. So we'll see how that works out. But it made a lot of sense just in terms of how the team is set up. And it feels like there's a vision and we're working towards that end goal more than it did last year.
Okay. I worry about how aggressively teams are going to lose. This is going to be an extremely aggressive losing year, but I guess if the Blazers accidentally win some games, they can sit him down. Because I have also heard that he is good, and I always love having people who do things the right way, that other of the younger players who are less developed can watch the guys who are doing things the right way. So that would definitely be an asset to have somebody on the team who's doing things the right way. And I don't really think that they're in danger of like being too good. But I'm just thinking in terms of like how many other teams are going to try to be really, really, really bad. But like I said, he could always, have a toe issue that night or something.
Yeah, I'll say being too good is a problem that I'm willing to deal with if it comes to
Because we have
fruition.
solutions to that.
Yes, exactly. There are easy solutions to being a little too good for a year that's supposed to be a good draft year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that attitude.
I have to believe we're going to make another trade and at some point, and I'm not that worried about being too good. I'm just not. I think even if our young guys have a lot of potential and talent, it's going to take them a minute to string that together in a cohesive way that means winning games consistently. And so I hope we win some more games than we did last year, but I don't think it's magically going to make us a team that is trying for a play-in spot.
Also, one of the things that I wanted to say also, so I know that like the Wizard, you said your Wizard fan base friends were a little sad about trading Avdija, and one of the things I will say that I noticed while watching the Wizards last year is that the Malcolm Brogdon trade to me seems pretty good for them. Um, they really were missing a veteran leader. Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole are on that team, but I don't think that they are those people. And they really needed a like level-headed veteran leader, and they needed a solid point guard to help develop that team because they were also young and they weren't very good or put together in a way that like made a ton of sense. And I could see Malcolm doing for them what he did for us, which was to help some of that team, you know, anchor good practices, good development, good time together, really good learning opportunities. And so I could see why the Wizards might have been willing to give up a promising player for that, because that felt like something that was desperately needed from their side of things. And I will say, and my hope is that that's what they want, because my hope for any Blazer when they are traded from this team is that they go someplace that is good for them and that they will be happy and that they are valued and have a role that they'll thrive in.
Yeah, Malcolm went to UVA, so he does have roots in that area. I have to imagine, like with other trades, that the Blazers probably asked him for a couple of different teams. It seems like that's what they do for guys who have done good work for us. So I'm also hoping that Malcolm is happy with that destination or had it on his list of one of the places that he would like to go to. And it'll be interesting to see if they keep him or try to move him for a pick. But I wish the best for Malcolm because he seemed like a very classy guy who probably was not excited to come to Portland, but put a smile on, mentored the young guys, really did what he needed to do to be a good teammate. And I think it really made a difference last year, especially for Scoot. And I just really appreciated everything Malcolm did for us, even though it was a short one season.
Yeah, well said. I think the Malcolm Brogdon era was a good it was a good thing. I think on balance it's going to be a good thing because you brought up Scoot. I bet he was super helpful to a young point guard trying to understand the jump, up to the speed of the NBA, and being able to have Malcolm's experience probably helped him a lot, I would think. Anything else that we want to discuss about the trade? Just to make sure we have it. The Washington Wizards agreed to trade forward Deni Avdija. I wrote it down how to say his name. Avdija. Avdija. Okay. Trade Deni Avdija. So the Wizards are trading Deni Avdija to the Portland Trailblazers in exchange for guard Malcolm Brogdon, the number 14 pick in the 2024 draft, 2029 first round pick, and 2 future second round picks. Wizards got Malcolm Brogdon, and they drafted Carlton Carrington with the 14th pick. I do not remember hearing that name called at all. That is very sounds like I just watched Clue last night, and it seems like that should be like the name of the butler, Carlton Carrington. It's a very fancy, very proper name, very proper sounding name.
I do want to say one other thing about this. We don't have to talk about this very long. And I'll just preface this by saying that, like, I assume good intentions from everybody, and I offer grace for mistakes because we all make them and I make them. But last week I saw something about this trade that sort of bothered me and made me sad. And I thought about whether I should say anything at all, but I couldn't help but think that if in another situation had a player that had been traded to us been gay or Muslim, I would have not hesitated to say such a thing. And so I want to say something about this now. So last week, like the initial reaction to this trade on Blazers Twitter was mixed. And there was some seeming negativity about Avdija being on our team because he's Israeli. And other people on Blazers Twitter voiced that made them feel a little bit unsafe. And I can understand that because who you are matters. Parts of your identity matters, but they're not all of you. And to me, the very best version of Blazers Twitter is when we are welcoming and inclusive, and we come together to celebrate this thing that brings us joy and that we love this city and this team. And last week, I saw some of members of our community feel left out, feel a little less safe. And I asked myself how we call each other in when we see members of our community say things that make other members feel unsafe. I don't know exactly how to do that, so I'm saying it here. I'll be the first to say I don't know everything there is to know about Deni Avdija. I don't. I've watched him play basketball. I think he's very talented. But I do look forward to getting to know who he is as both a person and a player before I decide to speak on how I feel about him. And I hope that other Blazers fans will do the same. We're all more than where we come from, our religion, the governments that represent us. And, for us to be judged on just those aspects of our identity feels really unfair because people are complicated. And like one of the things that we celebrate on this podcast is that players are more than just players. They are people too. And so they get to be complicated too. And so I just hope that our fans find a way to make space for people who want to give him a chance to show us who he is before we decide on how we feel about him. That's all I want to say about that. But please feel free to add or not add. I just felt like I needed to say that today.
Yeah, that was really well said, Rose. I think you did a good job of talking about that. It's a complicated situation. There's a lot of nuance. It's sometimes hard to have these conversations over Twitter. Sometimes they're better had in person. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. As we were chatting last night a little bit because I was like saying that like I don't know how to feel about this. We do always like to get to know the players and who they are and where they came from. And he's the country that he's from is involved in a very big war right now, and it's just having watched how that's all happening has been really scary and upsetting. And for me, I was just like, wow, I don't know how to process. I don't know what to think. And so I appreciate the words to like do what we've consistently tried to do, which is to look at the whole person and where they're from and learn about them. And they're not just, like you said, the countries or the governments that they came from. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. And I just want to like say, like, I know the Blazers Twitter is not the entirety of our community, right?
Yes.
Like they don't represent all of us. They're a subset, but because it has served as an important place of connection for a lot of us. I mean, it's how we met Tara and it's how also we met you, Kat. Like, I think it's important to just address that happened this week because I do think that there are members of our communities that are just feeling a little less easy than they were the week before. And I want to be able to say to those people that I see them and we want this to be a welcoming, warm, inclusive, and safe space for all of our fans. And that I hope that we all give one another the chance to get to know each other and reserve our judgment for a later time, the same we do with all of our players and all of our coaches and the people who participate in our community in big and small ways. So yeah, that's all I want to say. We can move on.
Well said.
Thank you. Kat already mentioned the next bullet point that I have, which is that Delano Banton's option got picked up. We got another year of Brogdon, or at least he's going to be on the roster at the beginning of the season anyway. I was delighted. I'm guessing you all were too.
I'm
Absolutely.
psyched.
I love a tall point guard. I really do.
Also, technically, isn't he a champion now? Because doesn't he get a ring with the Celtics?
I
Yes.
did hear that.
Which is very exciting for him. I think that's pretty cool that they will, it sounds like they will extend that offer and then it's up to the player to decide whether they want to accept that or not. But it's got to be hard being traded midway during a season and then your team wins when you're not there. I mean, you kind of put in the hard work, especially somebody who's on the very end of the bench. That's got to be kind of tough.
Yeah. I can't imagine being a player like that. Don't get me started on how that's happened to some other players throughout history in the NBA who have led to important acquisitions that helped them make the leap. Hint, hint, Toronto Raptors, Valanciunas should have a ring. Um, I feel for those guys, and it also feels really, I can't imagine how bad it feels to be like, I'm on a winning team and now I'm on a developing team. But I will say when I think about a guy like Delano Banton, like it's maybe not as exciting in the short term, but it's probably better for his long-term development to be on a team that is developing and looking for guys to fill roles when he was on the end of the bench of a championship team, you know, at a point in his career where he could benefit from more playing time and also better opportunity.
Yeah, and he talked about that a little bit at the end of the season, how he was really happy to be able to be on the floor and be playing and show some of the skills that he has. So, there's definitely an upside to being on a rebuilding team. But I think during the playoffs, it must be kind of hard and also hard for Brogdon, Robert Williams. I mean, I think Boston made the trades they needed to do to get better, but it must feel kind of hard being on the other side of that.
Well, but lucky us. Another year of a tall point guard. Okay, let's move into the other biggest topic, which is rumors and speculation about free agency as the offseason continues. Not just free agency, but trades that may come. There's a lot of people jockeying for position, a lot of people trying to figure out what the new CBA rules mean. Lots of rumors and stuff out there. I'm going to do my take right now. You know, sometimes we save our takes for the end, sometimes we do our takes at the beginning. I'm going to start our off-season discussion, or our free agency discussion, with my take, which is that I think that, you know how I said that they should make a Bachelor-style reality show? My take is that the first free agent that they should follow is Klay Thompson. I think this would be absolutely fantastic to see what happens. Yeah, so anyway, what are your thoughts, observations, some of the things that have risen to the top that you're like keeping your eye on, or most interested in as we enter, just in a matter of a couple hours, NBA free agency period, or actually technically the moratorium?
I think I've been very similar to your viewpoints, Tara, around Anfernee. I think he deserves to go to a team that is not rebuilding. He's done his time. I don't think he fits the team anymore as is. I think we've seen what we're going to get out of him. I think he would probably be happier somewhere else. So I would love to see a trade where he's able to go someplace that's going to be a better fit for him, and then maybe bring some of those picks and or pieces that we might need here. I think, you know, we've all talked about Orlando, just because they need a player like him, and also he could go home, but I think there might be some other teams that he could work out on. So I don't know. I think I love Anfernee, but I kind of feel like it's time to move on from that experiment.
Well, and to tie that into free agency, like I was just cruising along with Anfernee's a perfect fit to make a trade with Orlando. They could really use him. They need a player with his skill set and all of that. And then all of a sudden, in the last like 12 hours, Paul George is being talked about in terms of going there as a free agent. And I don't know what that would mean. I haven't like sat down and figured out, like, does that mean no Anfernee, or would that be better for Anfernee? Has anybody thought through that yet, or had time to think through that?
Well, and I wonder too, is that leverage conversation? You know, is that really someplace that he's looking at possibly going? Or is that being thrown out there for leverage? Like, there's multiple teams interested in him, so you better act fast and get your guy if you want him. So it's hard to tell at this point how much of it is agents just trying to make a better deal, or if it really is on the table.
Yeah, but the thing is that even if it's just that, Cat, the thing that I keep coming back to is the speed for which that trade can happen now just got a lot slower, because you can't take that meeting with Paul George and not have the available money to sign him.
Right.
Like even if you know it's a long shot, you're still in the game. And you still need to play that way, because if they meet with him and they don't have a reasonable way to sign him, like he probably should cancel that meeting. So the speed at which any Anfernee, like I think that an Anfernee Simons trade to the Magic just slowed down, and it will definitely depend on what happens with that. So the order of operations just changed a little bit. And I think that depending on how eager the Blazers are to trade him, and it's hard for me to not read into the idea that they would really like to, because nobody's even said his name in this offseason. When they're talking about planning for the future, they're like Shaden and Scoot and DeAndre. No mention of Anfernee Simons, like he wasn't the best player that we had on our team last year. So I have to imagine that they're going to trade him, but the patience, I don't know where they're at. But I also can imagine that the trade package that you could expect for Anfernee varies a lot. And what Orlando could ask if they're able to sign Paul George, which again, I don't think they're going to do. But if they're able to sign Paul George, the assets that are available to trade for him may not even be there, even if they wanted to, because who knows what it's going to cost to sign Paul George between like salary and all this other stuff. And like they might not be able to like part with some of the stuff that they would need to, because Ant makes a decent amount of money. He makes a decent chunk of change. And so I started thinking about like where else he could possibly go where he would make a meaningful contribution, because there is need for his skill set like that. And I had this funky idea based on some of the moves that I saw recently. I was like, what if the Pelicans decide to get away from CJ and go for Ant?
Ha!
Because they've just made a bunch of moves too. And CJ, he was a good vet leader and he did a lot for that team, but they're like, it's hard for me to believe that they don't need to get away from some of these guys that they've had on their roster because of some of the changes that they've made. Like, I have you guys been keeping up with this at all? So like, they traded for DeJounte Murray. What's the future for Brandon Ingram? What's the future for CJ? These are all like big salaries. Zion makes a lot of like, there's a lot of reasons why you might commit to someone who's younger rather than keep CJ around and trade CJ elsewhere. It's hard for me to imagine he comes back here, but he's already got a house.
Oh gosh, I didn't even think of that. Wow. I was thinking more around the lines that they're going to be trading BI. I wasn't even thinking about somebody like CJ, but you're right. I mean, that could potentially work.
I'm glad you brought up CJ because I've been reflecting a lot lately on how I am so passionate about Anfernee finding a new team to play for. Because I really, really am. I really think that he has put in his time here. He's done everything that was asked of him. And it's just not fair to him for him to be sat down another season if they win too many games. And we've talked about they're not really that in that much danger of winning too many games, but like you're gonna have to like be moving the things around. But it just they're not trying to win, they're trying to build something. And Anfernee has been around building things. Like, let the guy go somewhere where he can play for something. And it made me think about all those different conversations in years past about people who were saying, we need to trade CJ now. CJ needs to be traded now. And I don't think that's how I'm feeling about Anfernee. I'm not feeling like we need to trade Anfernee because he's like a detriment to the team or he's clogging up space really necessarily. But it also reminds me of those other conversations where people were saying, let Damian go. And I was very much like, no, he says that he wants to be here. He will be here until he says he wants to leave. He says he will be here. He wants to be here. And I was very much in that, like, no, he doesn't care about going somewhere to win. He wants to do it his way, here. And I think I'm closer to feeling and understanding the people who were saying, no, let Damian go. Let him go now. Let him go compete for something. I'm feeling closer to understanding where those people were coming from now that I'm seeing it kind of play out with Anfernee.
I've wondered myself if Anfernee has asked for a trade. That would not surprise me in the least bit. I also think the other thing about Anfernee, and this is not meant as a dig in any way, but I think there was some hope that when we moved on from Dame, Anfernee would be the natural leader. I don't see him as a natural leader. I just don't think he has it in his personality. It felt similar to when Minnesota was really trying to have Cat be their leader. And he's a very good player. He's not a natural leader. And so I think Anfernee needs to go to a team where they're not looking for the natural leader in him. He's a very good player and he can play alongside a natural leader, but I just don't think he's that guy.
There are a lot of super successful teams where their best player is not their like, I would say, like, emotional like leader of the team. Like, I think about like the team in the Bay. For a long time, their best player was not their leader, even though sometimes people tried to cover them that way. Like, we all could see who their natural leader was of that team, and it wasn't their best player. wasn't even their second best player. Like that's a skill set that is unique to, and it's not necessarily always going to be in the best player that you have on your team. It's great when it is, but it's not necessarily how it's going to end up, and it's also not necessary to be a successful team and to be a winning team. You just need to have someone that's willing to step into that role of responsibility and be that person.
Are you saying that Draymond was the leader of, who are you saying is the leader of, what do you think was,
Yes.
okay.
He was the leader of that team. And I don't care how
Interesting.
much people tried to sell us that like it was Steph or Klay or anyone else. Like
Huh.
it was Draymond.
I never
Draymond,
thought that.
that's so crazy. Who did you think it was?
I thought it was Steph. You don't
I
think
didn't
so?
never thought that. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe I am the odd person out here.
No, it's really curious. I just you know, bought the storyline, but I could totally see why, like, you know, he could be the more like behind the scenes, like driving, and you know, while somebody else who's the best player is like the face. Yeah, I literally just had never thought about it that way before. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there just has to be a reason why the minute that Jordan Poole and Draymond were on the outs, the Jordan Poole was out and they sold him for pennies.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Like
true.
they had to get rid of him when the leader was out on one of the people who was supposed to be coming up as the second generation underneath, and he was out with the current leader. Like they got rid they it's like in the animal kingdom when somebody gets a little bit too like clashy with the herd, the like the top of the herd, the alpha, and then all of a sudden that alpha casts them out. And the Warriors did a really good job of getting rid of Jordan Poole, and they didn't probably even get the most that they could get for him. They just got him away.
That's interesting thought. I've not thought about it that way, but I think about it too, kind of like with Boston. Is Jason Tatum the leader? I don't know. After the playoffs, it kind of seemed like maybe not. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think sometimes we just try to put people in positions where it doesn't match their natural abilities, even though they are a very, very good basketball player. So I think fit is really important to wherever somebody gets traded.
Yeah, and we had it right here with LaMarcus. You
Yeah.
know, LaMarcus was left the leader because everybody else got injured and couldn't carry the team anymore. And so he like did the best he could. And then Damian came along and it was like, oh, I see. I see what it is. I see what it looks like. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What other stories will you be keeping an eye on? I'm fascinated by the fact that literally every single free agent is apparently going to Philadelphia.
Oh,
Philadelphia
I
has
know.
really got the marketing going.
Neil Olshey must be working his contacts hard.
I forgot he's there. That all
Special
makes so much
assistant Neil
sense now.
Olshey.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to look at free agents now and find out who is going to be the Tony Snell and Mario Hazonia that are going to go we're going to be going to the 76ers.
They're going to be very disappointed.
Can I just say that I'm kind of shocked that Paul George announced that he's like gonna like test the market? I was like, dang, what year is this? Like people don't do that anymore. Like guys, what they do is they sign like the maximum extensions that are available to them, and then they demand trades because they don't want to leave money on the table. And it made me wonder, I'm like, dang, what's going on in LA? Like, because guys these days just aren't walking away from free money. Like who's the last
Mhm.
guy that really did what he's doing right now, which is to say like pass and say, I'm gonna go out and find and look to see what other people have to offer.
I can't even think.
It's just wild. I guess, yeah, it's just wild. I guess did Kawhi kind of do that? Kawhi did that, but it was done in a way where everybody knew it was going to be LA, whether, you know, he knew we knew why and where. He wasn't a true like open market exactly.
Or maybe he's trying to press them for more money. I mean, that's
Maybe.
always a possibility as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good possibility. I could see. I mean, because just what a weird thing that they made such a big fanfare about them coming together, and now just a couple of years later, or I don't know, maybe it's been like 3 or 4 years. I can't remember how long it's been. Um, that suddenly he would be gone. It's the whole thing is weird, and a lot of it might be, yes, performative. Like, yes, I'm gonna go out and see. Our I think we're probably mostly in agreement that we're not expecting the Blazers to actually be doing much in free agency, but it also sort of, like, to Rose's point, that's when we can start seeing where trades involving the Blazers might happen.
Yeah.
I still think it's possible that we move some guys.
Mm.
I don't know who, but like I think that in any trade that involves Anfernee, it's not going to be a straightforward trade. If we, I don't think it'll just be like Anfernee for picks or something. Like it just feels like the deeper you get into the summer, the harder it is to pull off straightforward trades for players that make a lot of money. And it's
Mhm.
like sometimes it ends up a three-way thing. Like, I don't know. It just becomes a little bit more complicated. Because like I know I said it when we talk about salary cap or whatever, but like, salaries start being spoken for, and then it becomes harder to get those guys that make a lot of money, and you have to be a little bit creative about it. So I'm not like sold that like we're gonna have all the guys that are on this team on our roster come the fall, just simply because I think that it just becomes harder when you're trying to move a big guy.
Yeah. And there's been some talk in the media about Robert Williams being shopped. Now that's a small trade piece. I don't think that's a significant trade, but that could also be a part of a bigger package too. So I think anything is on the table. I mean, you all know how much I love Jeremy. I would love for us to keep Jeremy for another season, even if it's just one more season, but I also want him to be happy. So if that means he's ready to go somewhere else now, I'd be okay with that, but I hope we see him suit up next year, at least for part of a season. I know it's not going to be long term, but I would like to keep Jeremy as long as possible.
I can't imagine where we'd be spending our money if we got rid of both Anthony and Jeremy in the off season. I'd be like, who's going to be taking all this money? There's still like, I mean, people are worried about like being up against the cap, but there's also a minimum.
Right.
Yeah, they can divvy that up, but they divvy that up between the remaining players. Um, the thing that I'm also remembering, and maybe you all are experiencing this too. Last year was really unusual what we went through. And I feel like we're a little scarred by that. Like, our last remembrance of like big trades is the Damian Lillard taking until basically training camp, and the whole thing being dragged out. So I'm hoping whatever happens, it just happens quicker this year. And I think there's a good chance it will. But because last year was so intense, that's just sort of our last memory.
It was traumatizing.
Yeah, it was horrible.
I wonder how Damian is doing.
Oh God, I don't know.
I've been thinking about him a lot lately. I've like, enough time has passed, and the whole like my feelings of like, well, you wanted to go somewhere and win, you're the one who wanted to go to a better place. That has calmed down for me, and now I'm just like, oh gosh, I hope he can get back to being happy. I see he's back in town. He's having his summer parties like he usually does. I hope he's happy. I really do.
Yeah, he looked sad last season.
He really did.
I mean, he's kind of one of those guys who can put on a good face, but you can also kind of tell by the quotes he posts on IG how Dame is really doing. That's really where it is. It's not what he looks like on camera, it's the IG quotes that he posts, like your friend's grandma.
Yeah.
I didn't even think he looked happy. Like I thought he looked sad. I thought his quotes were sad. I don't even know if he put on a good face last year. And one thing I will say about Dame is that like he's not gonna lie.
Right.
Like I don't think that Dame would withhold, I think, and he has withheld a lot, I think, over the years that we had him, and not in a malicious way or anything, but just because he's private. And I felt like more than anything the fact that he said some of the things that he said felt quite sad to me. Like, do you remember that quote that they put out? I don't remember who did it, where he said it, but he said something like how he just sits at home and plays video games and then keeps going to the same boxing YouTube channel hoping they posted a new video because he's like bored and because he's used to having his family and his friends and his kids and all those people around him because he was in Portland and he brought all those people with him over the years. Like, I don't know, like I am worried that he's not doing great and I hope this summer is very restorative for his like joy. But God, like what a drama around that team. I just want to we don't have to talk about it or anything, but just like the sheer drama that happened in that team, like two head coaches, a lot of turnover, a lot of like kind of like chit chat about like what's going well, what's not, what the like politics are of that team. It just feels like that's not his style.
Yeah, and then you add on a divorce and being away from your kids. Like, that's just a lot of really, really hard stuff all at one time. So I'm not surprised that he looked sad last year. I just hope that maybe things will start to look up for him moving forward, regardless of where he ends up. And quite frankly, I think he would have felt some of that even if he went to Miami. I think it may have just taken longer to get to that point because of the excitement and the parties and, all that goes along with being in the Miami lifestyle. But I kind of think he probably would have ended up lonely there as well.
Completely agree. He is like in his core, he is like a community family oriented person and parties can only stand in for that for so long without that like meaningful connection you have with people who love you.
Yeah.
Door is always open for a return, Dame, if you're listening. Maybe he's so bored that he's now gotten down to our podcast in the Blazer podcast list. Like he's just like listening to Blazer podcasts all the time, listening to Sarah McLachlan music and listening to Blazer podcasts and just, oh, I can't wait to get back to Portland. You're always welcome.
Did you guys see that he's like on the like one of those two lists for potential ownership groups of a WNBA team here?
Yes.
I think CJ's in. I think CJ might be on that list too. I don't remember now, but Dame is definitely on one of those lists because I think that NBA players can own up to a certain percentage of a WNBA franchise before it's like a conflict of interest or whatever. But I just found that to be interesting because he's still looking for opportunities to invest in our community here, which also makes me feel like a little bit optimistic that we'll see his face again.
I agree. I hope so.
Door is always open. Anybody want to add anything more about free agency? I have one more topic that I want to talk to about that I hope you think is as fun as I did preparing it.
Please tell.
Okay. Today is June 30th, 2024. It is the end of the NBA's fiscal year. And as the end of the fiscal year, it means that the Trailblazers' last payment to Blazer legend Andrew Nicholson has been made. And after this, he will no longer be on the roster. Now, Andrew Nicholson has been kind of like a bit of mine over the last years, but he's also a person too. And I want to like make it clear that I didn't ever think he, the person, was a joke. It was just the way that the Blazers did things. They had to get off Alan Crabb, so they got this guy and they waived and stretched this huge contract. It was a big contract for 7 years. And it was just so emblematic of how Neil Olshey left our team on his way out the door. So I wanted to do a version of our traditional get to know a player before he is officially gone from this team. So I want to tell you what I learned about Andrew Nicholson. And no surprise, he's great.
I'm shocked.
Not be surprised about that at all. So I will try to keep this pretty short, as I try to all the time. So Andrew Nicholson, Blazer great, Andrew Nicholson. He was born on December 8th in 1989 in Mississauga, Ontario, which is a outside of Toronto. So, we have more Canadians, Delano Banton and Shaden Sharp. Also, don't forget Andrew Nicholson is another Canadian who's been on the team. He's a 6'10", mostly power forward. So he is from the Toronto area, and he grew up wanting to be a physician. He wanted to be a doctor. He was his family, I believe, were Jamaican ancestry. And education was very important to them. He wanted to be a physician. And when he was a kid in high school, he played baseball, as so many of these basketball players do. He played baseball until he was too tall, and the basketball coach came over to him and was like, "Hey, why don't you come over to my gym?" So it wasn't until his junior year that Andrew Nicholson started playing organized basketball. Really late in the game compared to some of the players who started super young. So as a junior, he starts playing high school, and then the summer before his senior year, he breaks his foot. So he misses the whole summer AAU circuit time right before his senior year, which is when people start to get scholarships. And for him, he looked at it as purely a way to go to college so that he could get that medical degree that he wanted. So he actually ended up doing an extra 5th year of high school because he wanted to, like I said, get that scholarship so that he could go to college. So he ends up, he did get recognition from a few schools, wasn't hugely recruited. He was like a 2-star recruit, but he did have some offers, including where he ended up going, St. Bonaventure. I listened to a podcast that he was on, and they were asking him what was it about St. Bonaventure that he really liked. And according to him, the thing that really put him over the top and sold him was they had a brand new science building. And he was very excited because he knew that he was going to be studying science. And so they had a new building. Folks might know one of the NBA famous alum of St. Bonaventure is Woj. That's where Woj went to school. The other thing that was nice for him choosing that school is he was only about 3 hours away from his hometown, so his parents were able to come and watch him play a lot. One of the significant things, too, about St. Bonaventure at the time, so he would have been a freshman there in 2008-9. They were maybe like 5 years removed from a really intense eligibility scandal. So their team at Bonaventure, they had a player who was not eligible to play, and they found out late in the season. They had to forfeit all of the games that he'd played in, and then the whole team boycotted the remainder of the games. They're like, if you can't play, we're not going to play. So this happened in like 2003, I think, somewhere around there. And it was really crushed the community, the school, the team. It was a big impact. So by the time Andrew Nicholson got there, 5 years or so later, they were just starting to come out of this. And he also saw that as like kind of an interesting challenge. Not that he thought that he was going to come in and like, turn the whole thing over, but to him that was like a really interesting aspect of choosing that school. So while he was at St. Bonaventure, he was like he really made an impact. He was recognized right away, like as an all-freshman on the all-freshman team. He was people really loved him. They loved his personality. He had outgoing personality, loved him on campus. He loved it because they had this great science program. Although I'm not sure when it was, but eventually he started off as a chemistry major, but he ended up changing his major later on to what he called an easier major, physics, which I don't know what world physics is easier than chemistry. But he said that as a chemistry major, he had to do 3 labs a week, and he felt really bad because his lab partner always had to wait until he got back from traveling to do the labs. So he thought it was in the best interest of everybody to change his major. So he ends up a physics major. He goes all 4 years to St. Bonaventure, graduates with that physics degree, and his senior year, the basketball team was like hoping for like an NIT invite, but they went on a 10-game run at the end of their season, led by Andrew Nicholson, really stood out and ended up getting an invite to the NCAA tournament. So it was right after the NCAA tournament. I don't know how far they went into it. I don't think they went very far in it, but right after that, he declared for the draft, and he was drafted with the 19th pick, famously ahead of Draymond Green. He was taken with the 19th pick by the Orlando Magic. His NBA career never really took off. He was around long enough in the NBA to get a second contract. And he did make himself a career in the NBA, but I don't know if people would necessarily think that it was, fit in with his draft place. I really think that he went on this spectacular run. He led this team to the NCAA tournament. And so people were like, yes, we need that guy. And given that he had only started playing his junior year in high school, I think it was, he was maybe never going to have the deep, long NBA career that some of the other guys who were taken in that same draft had. So he played for the Magic, he played for the Wizards, and then he was traded to the Nets. And it was when he was playing with the Nets that he was traded to the Blazers in exchange for Alan Crabb. And it was never expected that he was going to play for the Blazers. And so that's when he was waived and stretched 7 years ago. He went on to have a really nice career in the Chinese Basketball Association. He's like, they really love him over there. He's been playing in China, and he's also, has he played in other teams? I think he's always played in China. But he's had a great career. And between his money that he got from the Trailblazers all of the year and the money that he made, playing professionally overseas, he's has a lot of businesses. He owns a couple of Filipino restaurants in the Toronto area. He grew up with a lot of friends from the Philippines and has always been interested in that cuisine. He has been to the Philippines a couple of times, but he never played in the Philippines. So he has a couple restaurants in the Toronto area. He owns a couple crumble cookie franchises. He also owns a business where he does merchandising, where they like build websites or make like t-shirts and stickers for people who are merchandising their stuff. Very much into investments and planning for the future. I don't think he has ever gone back. I don't think he ever will end up, I don't know, maybe he will end up going back to med school, which was his original dream, which got him playing basketball in the first place. But it just seems like he's like got a really nice situation where he's just doing well and he's really happy. And, that's the end of the Andrew Nicholson era today. And I just didn't want it to go past without letting you know a little bit about him, because I think he seems like an awesome dude.
I love that. And I knew none of that about him. So that's really interesting.
I'm so glad that he's one of those players that like had a strong vision for other things in his life, because I know that every now and again you see one of those players that like retires and then they're like, now what? And like, so many of them now are just like they turn into like media or media adjacent folks. It's like, I don't want to say I'm sick of it, because I like a lot of the stuff that those guys put out, but there's too many of those guys. Not everyone's voice needs to be heard in the realm of basketball after they're done. So and it sounds like that, basketball isn't his entire life, even if it's was a big part of his life for a while. And I was also happy to see that the crumble that he just opened was in Mississauga, in his hometown, and he opened it with Tobias Harris, which I didn't really realize that they were close.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
Yeah, he's friends with Tobias Harris, and um, they opened that crumble in his hometown, which is the first one, I believe, in Western Ontario.
Well, time for a field trip.
That's so cool. The other thing in going back about reality TV shows or documentaries, I think it would be really fun to see something around NBA, ex-NBA players who go to play internationally. I think that would be a really interesting thing to watch because in a lot of these countries, basketball is a really big deal. And I think, in terms of the NBA, we kind of think people that wash out go on to play international ball, and we kind of maybe look down on it a little bit. But I think it's really exciting in some of those countries, and I would be fascinated to follow various players on different teams across the world. I think that would be really fun to watch.
I think that's an awesome idea. And I also like I think you're right that there is a little bit of this like NBA exceptionalism attitude about basketball in the world. And the reality is lots of other places are really good at basketball now. And I could see if I were like a certain style of player and my strengths were in some areas and not others, that maybe the game in one of those leagues might fit my game better. And I feel like I might do better there, even if, the perception is that I should go to the NBA where I can make the most money. Like we've seen guys return from the NBA to other leagues, maybe where maybe they came from before, or maybe that they've wanted to play. And it's not necessarily because like they're washed and their careers are over. It's just like the right move for them, at the time. And I would love to see more of like why that makes sense because I don't get a chance to see a lot of international basketball outside of the Olympics. And it's really cool to see the different styles of play there are. Like, for instance, like we always talk about like the European leagues because like we get a lot of players coming from the European leagues now. But the reality is I haven't seen a lot of the style of basketball that's played there. And the players that have come out of those leagues and have been successful in the NBA feel very different than some of the guys that are like homegrown here in the United States or in Canada because the style they grew up watching this style of play. Um, and I wonder, like, similar to like how Major League Baseball expanded to like, include like the Caribbean, and now they're like expanding to like Asia to be like more recruiting in those areas where baseball is really popular. Like maybe the style of the game will change a little bit, and also the fan base might change a little bit. I don't know. Like it is exciting to watch though, and I wish I understood more about what those other basketball pieces around the world look like, rather than me just seeing like a highlight reel, which doesn't really give you like a good feel for the game. Um, but yeah, I would watch the crap out of that cat.
I
Well,
mean, this was the NBA draft a la Francais. That was a niche reference for Tara. I don't know if you picked that up. My it's sort of a take on eggs a la Francais. Luann quote, but
Luann.
really, like, what is going on in France? It is very exciting. We are getting some really, really good players coming out of there, and there's definitely something going on in their leagues that I would love to know more about.
Yeah, there's both wondering like what French players are doing to like become like starting to be becoming so exceptional. We have like Tumani who wants to like put Belgium on the map. So there's that whole aspect, and then there's the aspect of US players who go over and play internationally and watching what they do. And I love following players like after so many Blazers have not ended up playing much longer in the NBA after they were Blazers and ended up going international. So I love watching Jake Layman is like having just this wonderful time in Japan. Like the Japanese crowds like love him, and they love it when he brings his little kids onto the court and they just think they're so cute. Or like Didi Louzada, put a pin in that, who is playing in his hometown in Brazil right now. And it's just fun to watch players can go be able to have, it's like if you can't play in the NBA, like I understand that like that's like where you're like really want to go and headed, but there are places all over the place where you can have, you can continue to have a career, you can make a living, you can support your family, you can get through, and you can do that thing that you grew up loving. Just bringing it back to Didi Louzada. Didi Louzada, for those of you who remember, also played for the Trailblazers. And while the Andrew Nicholson era is coming to a close, we are now fully in the Didi Louzada because I believe we have 5 years left to pay on his contract that was waived and stretched. A lot bigger difference monetarily. But yes, so thank you, Andrew Nicholson, for your contributions, and welcome, Blazer fans, to the Didi Louzada area.
We will be here until 2029, everybody.
Okay.
Didi Louzada Era.
Thank you for checking that. Excellent. So I gave my take earlier, but did we cover your takes? Have you already said your takes, or should we have do you want to go ahead with your take, Kat? What's your take?
My take, and I kind of said this on Twitter earlier this week, but if Woj is able to tweet about trades during the second day of the draft, he can talk about them on air. It was driving me nuts in the second round how all of this movement was happening with trades and picks, and they were explaining very little of it in the broadcast. And he was right there on the broadcast. And so they need to figure that out. If they're going to do separate days, fine. It sounds like GM's kind of like that process, but they need to figure out a better way of doing the broadcast so viewers at home understand what's going on. I only understood a little bit because I was watching Twitter, but it was never really confirmed on TV. So I was completely confused a lot of the second round.
Yeah, it's funny. So I'll say, I totally agree with you. It was like there was two Wojs. One Woj in like the Twitter like world, and then there was a Woj on TV that was a completely different world. And those Wojs didn't seem like they were talking to each other at all. And I can't believe I'm saying this. My take is related to yours, and my take is that there were too many trades. I loved action on draft day. I think it's awesome, but like there was too much going on. I'm like, where did this pick go? Who's got it? Who are we picking for? Because they don't really announce those things until like later for some reason. And I can't believe I'm saying this. There were too many trades. I couldn't keep track. And the second day didn't make that easier because it just created more trades for me to keep track of. And at the end of the day, I was like, I don't even know what happened to that pick. I had to go back and Google it to make sure that I understood that that last pick got sold for cash because there was too many things to keep track of. So I'm sorry. I feel like they'll probably keep this format, but I'm kind of bummed because it was not a joy to follow, even though it should have been. And I was actually kind of disappointed that the second day what happened the way that it did because it felt like it was happening in like a side room. It happened in the middle of the afternoon and a zillion things were happening and I didn't know any of the players involved that deep in the draft. And I was like, well, I don't know this guy and I don't know where he's going because like they're telling me where he's going, but who knows where he's actually going because that hat doesn't tell us anything.
Even if they could put it at the bottom of the screen in writing, I get that their on-air time is limited and maybe what they can say is limited, but there's got to be a better way of tracking it. And whether that's just at the bottom of the screen or some other way, you should not have to watch a broadcast and be looking at Twitter to be able to get the information about what is going on. And I assume maybe some of the two different Wojs is maybe Woj wasn't actually tweeting it himself. Maybe his people work for him were doing that piece, but it felt incredibly disconnected.
Yeah, I'm not ready to go to the place where Woj has a team tweeting. I know that's naive of me. I know that's very naive, but like, yeah, it's all Woj, right?
I
They
don't
could,
know.
I never even crossed my mind. They could just have Woj talking in the little box in the center and then have Woj's tweets just going along the side. And then at least it would all at least be in one place.
He's like Woj and Matrix Woj. you know, like you just like they're very different people and they have very different information, and one of them is living in a different reality than the other. But it was just, yeah, it felt very disconnected. And I was like, is he tweeting those from sitting in that seat? Surely not. Because he was like on air for a significant
Right.
amount of time while those tweets were still going out. What
That's
did
why
he?
I kind of assumed he had people, because it didn't look like he was typing. And maybe Woj needs to pick a lane. Maybe he's either going to be the tweeter of the draft and not be on air, or maybe he's going to be on air and not tweeting the breaking. I don't know. I just feel like the roles need to be figured out so it's a more seamless process and the viewer can understand what's going on.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
just crushed to think that Woj isn't actually tweeting all of that, but I have to be realistic.
And he couldn't, it was not a
I feel like I've
situation.
lost my innocence.
It's not a situation like Woj doesn't have one of those accounts that he can queue up saved tweets to tweet out on schedules, because you know what I mean? Because like the information that he's giving you is like it's fast as soon as it's available. Like, and he's competing with Shams in some weird
He
kind of
probably
other
drafts up.
dimension.
He probably has a lot drafted. I bet he has a lot drafted.
Sure, and I bet you that he has a lot of like information where he's like, someone tells him like this is gonna happen, but it
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet. So he queues it up, but he can't send it until somebody tells him. And the idea that somebody's out there saying, "Well, I'll just call Woj's assistant because Woj is on the air right now," feels bizarro world.
I don't know. I just couldn't think of a different way that it was happening because he was on camera. So maybe
Right.
he's doing it. Maybe there's an AI Woj that operates alongside of him. I don't know. The
Maybe
whole
that's
thing is weird.
maybe it's a secret St. Bonaventure thing, and maybe that's how Andrew Nicholson was able to draw a salary from the Blazers and go play in the Chinese league. It's just if you go there, you were able to multitask like that.
Maybe they cloned Woj. There's two Woj's, or he has an identical twin Woj, and that maybe Woj is the one who needs a reality show. What it's like being the ultimate NBA insider, because I would love to get a peek behind that curtain.
Yeah, maybe we could also follow Shams and then they could do competitions against each other, non-tweeting competitions, and duke it out that way.
Or it could be like Project Runway and what's the sewing one? What's the fashion design Bravo show? Oh no, that is Project Runway and America's Top Model. You know, they kind of like go together. Like they could intertwine. The NBA free agency like is on, we're following the free agents, and then you're following the people who are covering it, and they like pass each other by. Okay, we have so many good ideas, but we should go ahead and wrap it up here because things are going to start moving maybe pretty soon. Hopefully Blazers moves will happen sooner rather than later, and we'll know what the team is going to look like before September. But I wanted to thank you both for this excellent conversation. I feel like I haven't talked about basketball in a really long time, so it was great to talk about it with both of you. Anybody want to have any final words or share where people can find their basketball takes should they wish?
Kat, where can people find you?
Kat Renzer on Twitter and same on Instagram.
Awesome. I'm Roselle Harding on Twitter, on Instagram, and you can also find me in the We Have a Take Discord. Tara, where can people find you?
They can find me at TCB Biggs on Twitter, and you can find the We Have a Take podcast at We Have a Take on Twitter. Thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate you, and go Blazers.